Hey guys, I'm here today with a deck profile for Scrap Orcust. Um, just ignore that it says Reptile Orcust up here. It used to be, but I just kind of changed the cards around for this profile. But it is a Scrap Orcust deck. Basically, I asked you guys if you wanted to see deck profiles, and some people commented that that would be something that they're interested in. So I kind of thought about what I wanted to do, if I wanted to cover meta, cover budget, or rogue or whatever. And I decided that I would try to do a budget series and try to go over decks that are more on the budget side, but are still competitive and fun. And something that you could take to locals with and win and still have fun and not break your bank, basically. And how I'm going to do this is basically kind of go through the deck profile first, and then kind of talk about the deck, and then talk about how consistent it is, how competitive it is, and then also go over like budget options for cards, for like replacement options for cards that are more expensive. But with that aside, let's go ahead and take a look at this deck and kind of talk about it for a little bit. So first we're running 3 Forbidden Droplets, 2 Mech Knight Gearsus, 3 Orcust Nightmares, 1 Orcust Simple Skeleton, 1 Orchestrated Return, 1 Orchestrated Babel, 1 World Legacy World Wand, 1 Allure of Darkness, 3 Orcust Crescendos. I'll talk about that later while I'm running 3. And then 2 Fusion Destiny, and then 1 Destiny Hero Dasher, 1 Destiny Hero Celestial, 3 Scrap Raptors, 1 Scrap Recycler, 1 Scrap Golem, 1 Christian Rosenex, 1 World Legacy Succession, 2 Twin Twisters, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Effect Failures, 3 Fossil Dig, 1 Scrapyard, 3 Ash Blossom, and 1 Foolish Burial. And then for the extra deck, I have Appaloosa, 1 Burl Sword, 1 Verte, 2 Dingirsus, 3 Galatias, 1 Axis Code, 1 Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, 1 Zeus, 1 Scrap Wyvern, 1 Live the World Key Blade Master, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and 1 Nightmare Unicorn. As for the side deck, this isn't really the side deck. It's more of replacement options for cards in this deck. So first off, we're going to kind of talk about budget options. So for the Forbidden Droplets, this is definitely going to be the most optimal build because there's a lot of cards that you want to get in your graveyard. So it's not really a cost to use it because say if you have this and Orcust Nightmare in your hand, you want to get that Nightmare out of your hand because it does nothing for you in your hand. So for that reason, Droplets works really well with your Orcust, what am I looking for here? Orcust package. I don't know why it was not coming to me. But what you can do if you don't already have these or you don't want to spend the $400 for the playset, might even be more now, is you can play Forbidden Chalice. It is a quick play negate, so it can deal with some of the similar issues that Forbidden Droplet can deal with. And really the only drawback is that that target gains 400 attack, but that doesn't matter whatsoever. But you don't get to discard and they can respond to this card depending on, what the response is, because it is quick play. But so Forbidden Droplet's definitely going to be the better option for this deck, but you can still play this deck just fine with Forbidden Chalice. It's not going to kill the deck by any means. And then next for Ash Blossoms, I'm sure most people have Ash Blossoms around. I actually sold mine. I actually only have 1 left just because I have the ultra rares, and to me they're not worth $35 a piece, and I don't really play Ash Blossom too often. The only reason I kept 1 around is just in case I want to play it with what is the card called? Let me look real quick. I'm going blank today completely. It is Crossout Designator. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. But yeah, just in case I want to play Crossout, like you really need to have one Ash to play that card. But anyways, for the Ash Blossoms, if you want, you can replace these with Ghost Ogres, which are, currently are kind of dealing with quite a lot of problems showing up in the format. So Ghost are actually pretty good right now. So if you wanted to, kind of go the budget option, you could replace these with the Ghost Ogres. And it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Honestly, I think they kind of deal with different situations. So it is kind of not both, one-sided, one not, so that you can kind of adapt. But same thing, like I think you can, if you pilot this deck well enough, you can get away with these budget options. And also, I mean, this is probably not a deck that you're going to be taking to Worlds or a YCS. I mean, a YCS you probably could. And I mean, obviously, you're probably not going to come in first, but you could probably still do decent. But this is mainly for like having fun and doing well locally, or at your locals or casually among friends. And then that's really the only expensive cards other than Fusion Destiny, which you can't really replace because you really need to play that Destroyer Phoenix package. But those are the only like real expensive cards in this deck. And luckily there are other options for you if needed. And then as for the 3 Orcust Crescendos, I like playing 3 because I actually don't mind drawing this card. And the reason is I'm always going to have like my Orcust stuff on board. And usually on the first turn, like I absolutely recommend getting your Babel, because that's going to allow you to play on your opponent's turn and disrupt. So that means you can't really search for Crescendo your first turn, which means you're going to be searching on your opponent's turn. And that means Crescendo is not going to be alive until your second turn. So that's, to me, is kind of problematic, or at least seems to me that's kind of a waste. Like I almost don't even care about playing Crescendo unless I'm going to be able to have it as another interruption, or at least potentially be another interruption on my opponent's turn. You can let me know if you disagree. That's perfectly fine. You could play it at 2 or 1 if you want, and play other hand traps or other disruptions if you want. That's completely up to you. That's kind of why I have some other options to side these cards out if you want to, especially if you're going second. You can play evenly matched instead. But that's up to you, and that's like my personal choice. As for the Twin Twisters, I think this might be a little bit outdated. One of the reasons I traditionally would play this card in this deck is the same reason I like Forbidden Droplet, is pitching cards to the graveyard that need to be in the graveyard. The problem is the trap decks that are running around right now are like Eldlik, where it doesn't, if you get their traps in grave, it's not going to punish them super hard. Like they're going to still be able to get something out of that via searching with those, by banishing those trap cards. So really replacing that with Cosmic Cyclone is probably going to be your best option in this format currently. Not to say that won't be, like, Twin Twister won't be more optimal down the line. But yeah, it could actually, Twin Twister could be decent against Sky Striker, which is kind of starting to make its run now. But like I said, again, like Cosmic Cyclone is still pretty good against that deck too, because like if you can get rid of an engage, not that you really can, because I don't think anybody's going to set an engage. I mean, that would be really reckless. But banishing is pretty good. Like banishing any traps or spells is pretty good for the most part right now. Fairy Tale Snow is kind of like $3, but if you get the common, if you want to get the super rare, it's really expensive. I would not advise you get the super rare. I just think it's kind of cleaned off the market. We probably are going to get a reprint as an ultra rare. I would think in Ghost from the Past, since they just released it. Usually they don't care about the secondary market, and if something's old and they're released off the ban list, they want it to be available to people, which, you know, I kind of agree with. So I think that we will see a reprint of that soon. And then as for the extra deck, nothing is really too expensive here, except for your access code and your Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. But What I will say is you can switch access code out for something else if you wanted to play a different Nightmare card or additional Dingirsu or something else. You don't have to play access code talker. It's just going to be the best card that you can play for the most optimal build. But like I said, if you don't want to spend that extra $50, $60 to get that card, by all means, you can play something else and still have fun with this deck. There aren't really too many choke points where, like, if you try to budget it out, that it's going to ruin the deck. The deck's still very playable. There's only one card that I would say you can't really switch out, and that's Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. It's just too good for this deck. And then the other thing is too, is if you wanted to do the whole Scythe Lock thing for this deck, you can. I just think that it's probably not the best in this deck, in my opinion. I think you kind of have to commit too many resources to doing that. Whereas if you go more with playing Orcust, and then your Destroyer Phoenix and like an Appaloosa, you're just better off. Usually what you can end on or expect to end on with this board, if you can, start with your Scrap Raptor, which is your normal summon, is usually a Galatia, a Verte, meaning you can get your Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, and a 2 or 3 material Appaloosa, which is really not bad. But yeah. Oh, also, if you're wondering why I'm playing Fossil Dig, it's because the most important card for you to open for your normal summon is going to be Scrap Raptor. So you really, really want to try everything to see that card in your opening hand. So you can search that off Fossil Dig, and you can also search it with Scrap. I am running 3 Fossil Dig just because it's actually a lot cheaper, I think, than running Scrapyard. I think Scrapyard hasn't been reprinted. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I think that it's still only a super rare from Duelist Revolution. And the last time I checked, it was like $8 to $12. So I still play 1 because, I mean, that gives me 7 chances of seeing this card out of a 40 card deck, which is pretty good for consistency. But if you're wondering why I'm playing Fossil Dig, that's why. I guess other than that, I'm trying to think if there's any other things I need to kind of go over. Oh yeah, so I was playing 2 Allure of Darkness, but that was when I was more playing like the deck as a more Orcust heavy deck where you have a lot of darks in hand, especially when it was Reptile Orcust, because I had a ton of darks. But now there really aren't that many darks, and there aren't really that many darks that you want to banish, really. Like the only thing you can really afford to banish is like Girsu or a Orcust Nightmare, and then everything else is either Earth or just light or various other things. And obviously you don't want to banish your Dasher or Celestial. So the only reason I play 1, and I'll probably eventually cut it, we'll see, is just like if you have no other options, it's not terrible, I guess. But I've also seen hands where I like draw the 1 of, and then I don't have a dark monster. Or I have 1 dark monster, which is like Girsu, and I really, really need that to start the combo if I don't have Scrap Raptor. So I don't think that it's probably the best card. Honestly, playing like another Scrapyard would maybe be better. But that's up to you. Or playing another Orchestrated Return. But completely up to you and what you decide to do with your deck. But for the most part, everything's very budget. Like I said, you have options to replace the more expensive cards. You don't for the Fusion Destiny stuff, but I mean, that's like $25 now, I think, or maybe 30 for two copies. But I think overall, if you were to go the most optimal build, you're probably looking at like 750 to 800. I know that sounds like a lot, but with Forbidden, most like half of that is Forbidden Droplet, and a little bit over half is Forbidden Droplet and Ash. But those 2 play sets of cards you can play in literally every other deck, basically. Just about. Forbidden Droplet is not as versatile. Like there's some decks that you really can't afford to get rid of resources, but for the most part, most decks can utilize Forbidden Droplet. So that carries over to any other deck that you want to build, especially Ash Blossoms. So while that seems expensive for this deck, I would really average it over more decks because it's not going to be just for this one deck. You can play any deck that you're building with those cards. But if you're going to go budget and not go the Forbidden Droplet Nash route, I think you could build the main deck for approximately $120, $125, and then your extra deck is probably going to be, let's say, 175, maybe 150. And that's if you're cutting the access code out, like at the most budget option. So, I mean, probably at 300 or right below 300 in total for the most budget option, which is really good because there just really aren't a lot of budget options right now. And this deck's still really, really fun. But like I said, if you wanted to go all out, I guess with access codes, which are like 55 now with the gold rare, you are looking at probably more towards the 750 to 800 range. But as far as like the combo lines for this, I don't really have a good camera to kind of show you what your ideal combos are. I'm gonna order one actually so that I can do like those kind of things. But as far as like trying to film me like playing online games, I don't feel like that's the most optimum either. Because like, let's say I don't open the combo pieces and I just have to keep, re-enter, or like not the most optimal combo. Or if I'm playing somebody and they open 3 hand traps and I just can't show you anything. So I feel like it's better if I can kind of film like me with the hard copies, which I do have, going through the combo lines so that you can see everything without interruptions first, so you can get in where you're going, and not have any idea of what you're trying to do. Because I feel like if I get ashed on my first play, then I will have to do kind of a not the best play, and like while that might still be okay, you're not like going to be able to see where I'm trying to go with it. So what I'll probably go ahead and order a camera, and we'll come back and do like a part 2 of kind of like the combo line for this. But if you are super interested in the deck, you can find similar deck profiles online that will have like a combo tutorial. It's really not super complex, but it can be. It just depends. Like if you like open Scrap Raptor, it is a longer combo to get to your end board, but the Orcust stuff is pretty easy too. I think where it gets a little bit more complicated with this deck is making the optimal decisions so that you have follow-up every turn. It's one of those decks that you can really easily overcommit too early and not have follow-up later. But I also think that's one of the best strengths of this deck is that you can, if you play like, if you practice and you get very good with this deck, you can play every single turn and always have follow-up. Which is like one of my favorite things about Orcust. But other than that, I think this is not the deck that you'd really want to go for if you're wanting to be competitive at like the Worlds or YCS level. Like it would do YCS maybe. Like you're not going to get a top 8 spot most likely, but it would still be fun and decently competitive. But as far as like a locals level deck that you can go and have fun and potentially win, like for sure, you could definitely have a lot of fun with this deck, for like at locals or casually with your friends. So I think that it's just a really good deck overall for what you're spending, and you're gonna get out of this deck. Really, it's not a boring deck as far as like combo lines. There's a ton of different combo lines you can do, and it's super versatile. But let me know if you want to do a follow-up video once I get a camera, and we can kind of do like a walkthrough of what the different combo lines are, and then maybe go through scenarios where you get ashed or whatever. I don't usually like to do those scenarios because it's super subjective, but I guess that can be helpful for some people, especially since if you just memorize what your combo line is when under perfect stances and you get to locals and you get ashed your first turn, you're like, oh shit, what do I do? So it is good for those things, personally, I think, when you're building. And it can also like help figure out like what gaps are in your deck and what you can do to kind of bridge those gaps. So I always recommend practicing with your decks, and not just practicing your combo line, but practicing what interruptions would do and how you can play around those interruptions. But other than that, I think that's all I really have for this deck profile. Let me know if there's any other deck profiles you'd like to go over. I can easily, put a deck together. And I think probably the next deck that I will cover would be Insector, because I just had the deck put together and had a chance to play like 30 or 35 games with it. Online, of course, not in person. That would take a long time. But I've got a good feel for the deck. And that one's actually like super, super, super budget. But that one has its own problems, and we can discuss that later. But as for pros and cons for this, I guess I probably should have gone over that. Pros, it's pretty budget, depending on what options you go with. And a lot of cards carry over from other decks that you might have already. It's super versatile. It can play, every turn. It can play on your opponent's turn. It's, has a lot of different types of interruptions for your opponent. And I would say also, this can also be a disadvantage, but advantage. It's not like a build-a-board deck per se, where it's like, I'm going to spit out every resource in my deck and build this ridiculous board. But hey, if you have Dark Ruler, you win. It's more of like, I'm going to put up a competitive board and interact with you on your turn. But if you break my board, I have plenty of follow-up plays, which is typically what I like to go for. And it's what I would call like kind of more of like a mid-range deck, not like pure combo. So I'd say that's my advantages for this. The disadvantages is it can get hurt by hand traps. And if you don't open like your Scrap Raptor or Gearsu, it's really hard to play. But that being said, you do have 7 ways to get to your Scrap Raptor. So it's at the same time not that bad of a, it's not that hard to get to your play. I'm gonna get to a good opening hand, really. I guess one other positive I would say is that you have like a lot of slots that I would say are filler for like hand traps or spell and trap removal, or like your Forbidden Droplets, Dark Ruler, like general board negates. And you can kind of tailor those to the format, whereas maybe some decks don't have as many slots that they can adapt to different formats. So I think it's pretty versatile as far as you can play it in a lot of formats. Not every format, but a lot of formats. As far as disadvantages, there are some expensive cards that you need to pick up. And like I said, you can brick, but honestly, not super common with this deck. And then I guess that's the main disadvantages I can really think of. I guess the third disadvantage is it's not going to be the most competitive deck in the room. Like, it's not going to build the most oppressive board. But like I said, if you can survive, like, you can grind out games for sure. And if you like a grindy deck, this one's definitely for you. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of disadvantages to this deck, other than just saying it. Yeah, it's not tier 0 or tier 1, but it's a pretty fun deck and can be very competitive. So if you're looking for a new deck and you don't want to spend a ton of money, this is definitely a good deck to check out. And that's kind of one of the things I would like to talk about as well. Is if you kind of have your core cards like Ash Blossoms, Forbidden Droplets, Zeus's, Axis Code Talkers, Appaloosas, like, the whole list. If you kind of have those around, it makes deck building a lot cheaper, like, kind of going forward, because a lot of these more expensive cards I already have. So when I built the core, it only cost me like, I don't know, like $100 to build this deck, because I had all the other cards. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like, it's an investment to buy some of these cards that are very versatile and are kind of what we call staples. So I would just keep that in mind too. Like, if you're like, oh, I don't really want to spend $800 on a Orcust deck, well, you can use your Forbidden Droplets from other decks, or you can just remember that you can always carry forward those cards to other decks and be playing multiple decks at a time if you want to. But that's all I have really to say. Like I said, if there's any other decks that you would like me to go over, I would be happy to do so. And we'll probably have a part 2 to this, and I'll show the combo lines, or the most common combo lines. But I hope you enjoyed. I also wanted to briefly mention I had thought about doing meta deck reviews, but those are pretty covered already. I feel like not enough people do like budget decks and like kind of talk about how competitive they are, what we kind of already talked about. So I thought that this would be something of value that people haven't seen as much. They might have seen it before, but maybe not as prevalent. Because me personally, like my competitive deck is PK Brave. But if I just upload a PK Brave deck profile, I mean, hundreds of other people have already done that. So I don't feel like I'm giving you anything special per se. With that being said, though, if you do want to cover meta decks, or a lot of people seem interested in that, I can definitely do that. And then I guess lastly, if you want to post any recommendations for changes that you would make to this deck, that's fine as well. It may not be the most optimal. I've had fun with this deck. And I'm not always concerned with like the 100% most optimal way to play something. I am more focused on what fits my play style. Because I think everybody has a different play style. Some people are more aggressive, like up front with building bigger boards, where some people might like to kind of set up a more grind game, which I'm more of that. I like playing more of a mid-range format and deck where I can play each turn. And I guess part of the reason for that is when I started playing again back in 2019, I started off playing like really combo heavy decks, and what I was running into, this is like right when Dark Ruler came out and Nibiru came out, and I was getting punished like super hard for playing combo decks. And so I kind of strayed away from playing pure combo, even though like I really love combo, and it's like if I'm just doing test hands to myself, combo's like a lot of fun to do that with. I think mid-range is really the best right now, in my opinion, as far as like being able to recover from Dark Rulers and Nibirus. I think from what I can tell, like a lot of people that are playing combo, if they see Nibiru or Dark Ruler, it's kind of like, all right, game lost, let's go to the next one, which to me is not fun. But yep, I guess that's all I really have to say about this deck. I will see you sometime next week with the market watch, and then maybe we'll do Inzectors next week as well. But thanks for watching.